Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Camp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Chamber of Commerce, with another candidate interview with one of our state legislative candidates, Sarah Abdouch. Sarah, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I am really looking forward to discussing some of these issues that are facing our business community and hopefully coming up with some good solutions in the future together.
We look forward to that as well. We always love having close relationships, not only with the candidates, but also any elected officials as well. Mm-hmm. So the first question I have for you is, what is the top issue Council Bluffs and Southwest Iowa are facing, and how would you propose addressing it if elected to the legislature?
Yeah, and that's an issue that it's a question that I think is going to hit a lot of different people differently, because everybody has the issues that impact them the most. I think if you talk to 20 different people in Council Bluffs and Carter Lake, which is the district I'm running in, you would get 20 different answers for what they perceive as the top issue. But I think one of the things that state legislators should be doing is, even while there are a lot of other issues that are happening in the periphery, they do need to maintain that view of what is really an impactful issue for their district. In my mind, that's actually the river. The river flooding is and continues to be one of the biggest issues that this area faces, not just here in Council Bluffs and Carter Lake, where you have people who have lost some valuable land, people who are having their basements flooded every couple of years. It's a pretty untenable situation right now. And I think one of the biggest things with the river flooding is that we're updating, we're fixing the levees, we're trying to do everything that we can to address things right here where we can, but we're not really doing a lot about how we're managing the river. Because I think right now, unless we change the way we're managing the river, it's going to continue to flood, and it's going to cost us millions and probably billions in the future as it continues to flood. So one of the main ways that I think we should be working to address that is actually by forming some sort of interstate compact with the other states around the Missouri River. And I know that there's a lot of red tape and a lot of hurdles that we would have to overcome in order to get any sort of good compact together, not the least of which is the federal government, which is currently in charge of managing the river. But I think that's really the only way that we can ever come to a good accord about how we stop floods from happening in the future. What South Dakota does, what North Dakota does, what Montana does, these all impact what happens here and even further south. And I think that's an issue that if we could get that addressed, it would be a massive relief for this region. So that would be one of my top priorities, actually.
Yeah, as you kind of look at the whole watershed and the entire river, the basins all the way through, from all the way up north, all the way down. Obviously, what happens up north with snowpack and rain and all these different things, it's so important as you look at those calculations.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is important because you understand this, the northern states, they do have a reliance on these sort of the lakes that they have, that attracting that sort of tourism. So it's not an issue that we can address just with our problems in mind, but we do also have to keep them in mind. And that's why I'm saying that, I think a few legislators should be meeting with legislators in the other states and starting to understand what their problems are so that we can come to an agreement. Right now, I work in the business world, and that's what I do is I work with other teams and I say, okay, what are the hurdles that stop us from delivering on X, Y, or Z for our customers, and how can we overcome those? If it's some sort of middle ground, if it's something where we can tweak this over here or that to make it more favorable for both parties. There are solutions out there and we can find those. We just have to have that dialogue and we have to have that conversation.
As you look at some statewide issues versus, regional in the Southwest Iowa part of the state in Council Bluffs, Potawatomi County area, what do you see as some of the top statewide issues needing to be addressed, and how would you propose to resolve them if you were elected?
That's another really big question. the reason I say that is because, again, every region has its own issues. I think one of the biggest things that we do need to be addressing here in Iowa is taxation. Our tax code right now, and it's not the worst, but it's definitely not the best, and it's certainly not the best for our area. In comparison to Nebraska, which is right next door to where we are, then it's good comparatively, but it's really not something that works for most people. So I think trying to find a way to simplify the tax code, to cut taxes across the board, it's one of those things. Anywhere we possibly can, we should be taking less money from people. that's kind of my motto. I know it's really easy to spend other people's money, but that's not what government should be in the business of doing. We should be in the business of, accomplishing our essential services and then kind of letting people do what they need to do with the rest of what they have. So.
Yeah, and those are issues, in my past life, I've done chamber advocacy for 7 years now here in the state of Iowa. And, income tax reform, we were able to accomplish that back in 2018. And we need to have, continue to look at those different things to make it competitive because, I think we went from, bottom 1 or 2 in the country as far as tax climate by some tax foundation rankings, I believe it was. And we dropped down a couple spots. So we're better than we were, but there's still work to do there. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the biggest opportunity that you see for the state going forward?
Yeah, and I don't know actually, because I'm not sure what other people's vision of this will be, but I think I have a little bit of a unique take on this because I've always worked from home, and I'm a professional. I can work from anywhere because of the job that I do, and one of the things that really does help that is the having a good, stable internet connection. There is a Senate candidate down in, I think, District 12, who is talking about the effort in Montgomery County to get fiber to every single house and every single business. So you have that stable, fast internet connection anywhere in the county. And that's very attractive. I mean, I think we have an opportunity to attract a lot of businesses over here as well. And that I think is a key anytime you're talking about developing the state, but also being able to attract those workers who can work from anywhere, who might want to be able to sort of withdraw from the city and sort of get out in maybe the middle of rural Iowa. Building up our internet infrastructure and allowing people to have that as an opportunity, I think is a really good way to attract professionals in high-paying careers to our area. And those kind of people bring a lot with them. They bring the desire for restaurants, for services. All of those would stimulate a lot of growth. And I think that's a huge opportunity because Iowa is beautiful. It's beautiful. And a lot of people, we complain all the time about the seasons, but everybody loves a little bit of that. Winter can draw a little long, but it's one of those things. We have a lot to offer, and we have a lot to offer to people on an individual level. And I think one of the biggest hurdles to that is often the infrastructure. And as we're improving that, and as we're looking to counties like Montgomery, because they did a fantastic job. I think they actually have fiber now to every single house and business, and they're an extremely rural county. If we could emulate what they did as a program across the rest of the state, I think that we have a really good opportunity to sell ourselves to that type of people.
And one thing that's really telling is that's an issue that chambers we've advocated a lot for over the years is broadband expansion, broadband access. And it has to be a comprehensive approach. And what I mean by that is, it needs to be your biggest of big telecommunications providers all the way down to the rural co-ops. And I would venture to guess down in Montgomery County, it might be one of the rural co-ops that are providing those services. And there's some funds and some assistance available from USDA Rural Development to help with that. And it's hugely impactful. But like I said, you have to look at the full gamut with that and look at leveraging those federal, those state funds, some of which are now federal through the CARES Act, and then that have been brought down to the state with the governor's discretion, and then down to the local level as well. So yeah, that's a really big issue, and it's one that we've talked a lot about, and it's obviously really been amplified during the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah. I work in my industry is telecommunications, and it's definitely one of those things we've seen, once everybody's working from home, there's just a huge spike in lag and, trouble connecting. It was just, it's one of those things we weren't prepared for it. And I think we do need to be really focusing on that for the future, because if something like this ever happens again, or, 100 other scenarios, we really do need to have that crucial infrastructure in place.
And as you look at kind of those big issues that we're kind of talking about, how do you envision yourself working with the chamber and business community to act on those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've already touched on that a little bit. In that kind of my day job right now is going to a lot of different groups with a lot of different interests, and trying to find some way of coming to an accord that meets everybody's needs. The Chamber of Commerce specifically, I think, is really great because it is sort of that voice for businesses and for representing businesses in a single unified fashion. So whenever we're talking about how we, change our regulations, they have less impact on businesses. How do we create a more fair environment for businesses to operate in? How do we make our tax code something that businesses are interested in moving here because of? All of those things are issues that we need input from business owners on. It's not something that any state legislator can just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to come up with this, pull it out of the ether and hope it works. Anytime we have an issue like that, we really need the input from our business leaders, because you guys are the leaders in the community. You're the lifeblood of everything that goes on around here. So I envision very much as being that representative who goes to the state legislature to be that voice of my local area, of my local businesses, of the people on the ground who really need changes to be made on their behalf.
And we definitely appreciate any collaboration we're able to have. As a chamber, we're very much collaborative. And one of our core tenets and pillars of our chamber is policy, public policy and advocacy. So that's definitely something we want to make sure we play a role in, but also in being a resource as well to those in elected office. Because as you mentioned, we're the voice of the business community, and we want to make sure we're acting like that on the advocacy front as well. And when you look at some of the top policy issues that the chamber is focusing on, we've touched on some of those. It includes things like income tax reform, economic development assistance programs. And what I mean by that really is, your Iowa Economic Development Authority budget and tax credits, the tax increment financing and local government tools to assist with economic and community development, and really placemaking initiatives. And what I mean by that is, those pieces that you're able to use to bring and put in amenities that attract and retain talent is really the most basic way to explain that. And how would you work and address those issues and partner with the business community in doing so?
Yeah, so I'm a very firm believer in unleashing the business community. One of the things is I don't want to get in your way as the state. The state has a role of making sure that everybody's playing fair and that there's an equitable playing field for everyone to be on. But the state should not be getting involved and manipulating things, changing things, forcing businesses to do this or that in order to, get this subsidy over here. We shouldn't be changing the direction of business, if that makes sense. So a lot of what I would actually want to focus on more than anything is getting out of the way. Finding out what regulations are stopping people from being able to advance their businesses. What kind of taxes are in place that are just onerous? What kind of permitting requirements are there right now that are just too stringent, that aren't required? And trying to cut those things back and just get out of the way of business. I think that's one of the major things that, because government in general has a very good way of continually trying to put new stuff in place. And a lot of the times we're not looking back and saying, okay, well, that stuff that we had in place for that time over there, is it still necessary today, or is it holding people back? Is it holding back our businesses? Is it holding back people who would like to start small businesses and enter that community? So that's what I would like to focus on more than anything else, is just getting out of the way. And if we could do that, I think you would see that our businesses would really tend to flourish, because business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they can get it done. As long as we're not, trying to trip them up and hold them back.
And when you look at kind of your unique skill set, what unique skills would you say you bring to the position?
Yeah, so I actually have a fairly unique background, and I think that's one of the things that helps me quite a lot, because I was actually homeschooled growing up, and then I went to Iowa Western and then on to a private college to get my bachelor's in English. And then I went into telecommunications because, that's what English majors do. We rarely work within our major.
Political science major. There's very few of us that do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I was in the English department, they published this list of like all the areas the English majors went into, and there are like 80 different occupations, and I'm like, all right. But it's one of those things. So, but having that as my background does help a lot, because it has helped with my communication skills and kind of my ability to sort of translate between different groups. And so then whenever I found my job in telecommunications, I was able to pick up a lot of more technical information and sort of piece that together. So, and in doing so, one of the major skills that I have developed, like I said, is kind of working between different groups, working between different teams. I think that we've all seen kind of how hyper partisan things have gotten recently, and honestly that's something that I just can't stand, because if you have somebody who's going to the state house and they are acting in a hyper partisan way, they're just not going to be able to get anything done. So they're not going to be a very good representative. Whereas it doesn't really matter who's in power. What I'm going to be focusing on and what I'm going to be working on depends on getting the majority of votes, and I know that. So I'm going to make sure that I'm able to take all those interests into account and work towards something that at least moves the ball forward for this area, for my district. So I think that's one of the skills that that I have developed over time, that is probably one of the best ones. It's easy to say I'm not really partisan, but at the end of the day, when it comes to making those decisions on behalf of District 15, it really shouldn't be partisan. And right now, I think it is, and that's something that I would like to change.
And along those same lines, why should voters cast a ballot for you on November 3rd or starting next week if they choose to vote absentee?
Yeah, so I'm going to go and I'm going to work as hard as I can to get things done. I'm not going to go because I like to put my butt in a seat and say I'm a state representative, and that's a really cool thing. I'm going to work. So if I am sent to Des Moines, that's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to work on behalf of the people in House District 15. I've been gathering a list of priorities, the things that I'm hearing consistently from people that I would like to, hit the ground running on right away as soon as I possibly can. And as long as I am sent back, if I am elected, that's what I will do. And as soon as you're done with me, I'll be out and I'll be happy with it. As if we can get a little bit accomplished for this area and we can move that ball forward and make people's lives a little better, that I'm more than happy to sacrifice the time and effort to get that done.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for your input. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. And we'll look forward to continuing to talk with you and working with you going forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.